يلا بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وأنعم على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم أما بعد. All right, and as usual, if it gets choppy, please let me know. Quick recap from last dars. We had gone over Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. We had gone over Sayyidina Fatima alayha salam and her defending of the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, and always coming to to save him and always coming to his aid. And as I mentioned, that was always the case with Sayyidina Fatima radiallahu anha wa alayhi salam and Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam radiallahu anhu. And in general, Ahl-al-Bayt, but especially these two alayhim salam, in every scenario, in every aspect in life, they were always the ones glued to the Prophet alayhi salatu salam, and always the first to defend him, to support him, to be by his side, to console him, etc., etc. So like we said, which is again, as a quick reminder, how she got her nickname, Ummu Abiha, the mother of her father, alayhi salatu salam. And then we discussed how she also was very well versed in nursing. Okay, she used to know how essentially be a nurse, and how she took care of the Prophet alayhi salatu salam when he got hurt in battle. And again, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu alayhi salam was helping her in that as well. And then we discussed how she made hijrah, right, to Al-Madinah, Al-Munawwara, at the age of 18. Okay, 18 years old. And it was after that when Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, he, like we discussed, he was not told, but people were mentioning Fatima alayhi salam to him. It's like, Fatima's available. Why don't you go and ask for her hand and get engaged to her, etc. So he did. And if you remember, before that, actually, she was asked, or her hand was asked in marriage from Sayyidina Al-Bakar radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, and the Prophet alayhi salatu salam. And remember this, she was at least 18 years old. He said, innaha saghira. He said she is young. Keep this in mind. We'll come back to this later on, inshallah, in the seerah. In any case, later on, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu alayhi salam obviously asked for her hand, and as we remember, he said, ahlan wa sahlan, and that's all he said. And then when Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu went back, to the Ansar, they asked, what did he say, alayhi salatu salam, and he told them, and they said to him, it would have been enough if he said one of those two to you. And then we ended off with how the Prophet alayhi salatu salam essentially, consulted Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam about the marriage and about Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, as opposed to the fact that he, obliged her or forced her, wal'iyadhu billah, in any way. And also keep in mind, just like we heard with her sister alayhi salam, when she married Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu an, the Prophet alayhi salam said the same thing in this case with Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, that umirtu bi tazwijika min as-sama', that I have been ordered to give my daughter in marriage to you from the skies, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And today we get into her, what we call sadaq or mahr. These days, the word or term sadaq is usually used in the North African countries, whereas the other, Middle Eastern countries and in the Khalij, etc., usually you either use the word mahr or they use muqaddam and muakhar. However, it's all the same thing at the end of the day. And one might ask, why is this important? We're going to get to why it is important, inshallah. عن ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال علي عليه السلام لما خطبت فاطمة قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ما عندك. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he says that Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam said that when I came to ask for Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam's hand in marriage, the Prophet alayhi salam asked him, what do you have? What do you got? And why we're mentioning this is because a lot of people sometimes get offended by that question, right? However, this is how the Prophet ﷺ conducted engagements, if you would, or marriages, etc. He asked him, he said, what do you have? What do you got? قلت ما عندي شيء. Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam radiallahu anh, he says, I don't have anything. So he was honest. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام then asked him, فأين درعك الحطمية? So he asked him, where is your essentially your powerful shield, or your destructive shield, if you would, al-hutamiyya. Basically, giving it a sense of status, giving the shield of Sayyidina Ali, his shield for battle, giving it a sense of honor and status because of how strong and how tough it was. It was called al-hutamiyya because كان يحطم, because his shield used to destroy anything that hit it. So any sword or anything that tried obviously to attack Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, and he would obviously have his shield to protect himself, his shield would end up destroying and destructing any object that was used against it. قال فأتيت بها فزوجني فاطمة عليه السلام. He says, so I went and I got it, and he married me off, or accepted my marriage to Fatima عليه السلام. وعن علي كرم الله وجهه قال لما تزوجت فاطمة قلت يا رسول الله ما أبيع. So now in another narration, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu alayhi salam wa karramallahu wajha, he says, when I went to marry Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam, he said, oh Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, what should I sell? So he didn't have anything, and he had one of two options. He said, farasi aw dir'i, my horse, right? Or my shield. That's all I've got. Keeping in mind that both those things at the time were extremely valuable. However, he didn't have anything else other than those two things that were worthy, or had the value to be given in mahr, to be given in a dowry for the marriage. قال بِعْ دِرْعَكَ. So the Prophet ﷺ said, sell your shield. فبعتها باثنتي عشرة أوقية فكان ذاك مهر فاطمة. So he said, and I sold my shield, which ended up getting him 12 uqiyah. Okay, and we're gonna cover what an uqiyah is and what the value of one uqiyah is. So 12 uqiyah, and he says that was the mahr of Sayyidina Fatima alayha salam. So now, what is one uqiyah? Because he sold it for 12 uqiyah. Okay, So now, one uqiyah, al-shar'iyya, so the weight or the value of one uqiyah in the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was worth, so one uqiyah was worth 40 dirhams. And the dirham is of silver. Okay? So when you do the math, that's equal to 400 in total, 480 dirhams of silver. Cool? So his shield sold for about 480 dirhams of silver. Now, قال الإمام عبد العزيز ابن أبي رواد, one of the tabi'is or تاب التابعين, فقومت الدرع 480 dirhaman. And he says, and when I guess took the value or evaluated the value or estimated the value of the shield, it was in fact 480 dirhams worth. ويدل ذلك ما جاء عن أبي العجفاء السلمي قال سمعت عمر بن الخطاب. So here أبي العجفاء السلمي says that I heard Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu once giving a khutbah, and after having praised Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., obviously like we do at the beginning of the khutbah, he says ثم قال ألا لا تغالوا في صدق النساء. He says, do not be extravagant, if you would, in the muhur or the dowries of the women. Do not be extravagant. فإنها لو كانت مكرمة في الدنيا أو تقوى عند الله كان أولاكم بها رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he says, if being extravagant had any honor associated to it in this dunya, or as a sign of taqwa with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam would have been the first to be extravagant, if you would, with the muhur or with the dowries. And then he continued on to say, ما أصدق امرأة من نسائه ولا أصدقت امرأة من بناته فوق 12 أوقية. So he said that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, anytime he gave a dowry, so I'm just gonna let him in. So anytime he gave a dowry to any of his wives in any of his marriages alayhi salatu wasalam, and anytime he married off any one of his daughters alayhinna salam, it was no more than 12 uqiyah. So the dowry or the meher that the Prophet ﷺ gave to his wives alayhinna salam was exactly the same as what was agreed upon in the marriages of his daughters alayhi salatu wassalam, which was again 12 uqiyas. And as we said, 12 uqiyas equals to 480 dirhams of silver. Now, what does that mean? What does 480 dirhams of silver mean? Each dirham is equal to about 3 grams of silver, approximately 3 grams of silver, which totals to about 1,440 grams of silver, which is, and the uqiyah and the basis by which they measure the weight at the time, differentiated between al-Hijaziyin wal-Iraqiyin. So in Iraq, it was one thing, And in Hijaz, it was something else. But the difference is about 100 grams approximately. Okay. So let's say approximately about 1.5 kilos of silver, which I don't know if one of you want to do a quick search what 1.5 kilos of silver equals today. Here, let me see if I can do this quickly here. 2 kilograms of silver. Here, let me put this in Canadian to make this easier. Okay, so just to give you an idea, 1 kilogram, according to this quick search, and I maybe there's other weights. I'm just doing a quick search on Google. Let's see if this is the same thing. Yeah, it seems to be about the same. So it's approximate. So 1 kilogram is almost $1,000. Okay, Canadian. 1 kilogram is almost $1,000 Canadian. So like we said, so let's say about $1,500 approximately Canadian at the time. Okay, $1,500 at the time. Now one has to ask, what does that 1.5 kilograms of silver get you at the time compared to today? So for example, $1,500 today won't get you very much, but at the time it was enough to it was a substantial amount of money. And the point is, by mentioning how the Prophet ﷺ, gave the same amount in marriage to his wives, alayhinna salam, and the same amount was accepted for the marriages of his daughters, alayhinna salam, is to show that essentially the mehr, or the dowry, should be a dowry which is the norm at the time. And just like Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu said, it should not be extremely extravagant, neither should it be extremely below the norm. Okay, it should be whatever the status quo is at the time, and obviously at the location that you're living in. So for example, someone here, for example, in the West, the average meher is, let's say, $10,000. But let's say they're originally from a country which necessarily doesn't is not as well off. Okay, let's not name any specific countries so we don't offend anybody. However, let's say they're originally from X country. However, they live here in Canada, and they decide to go according to the dowry of their country, which in their country, the average dowry, for example, would be, for the sake of argument, $2,000, which for them in their country is a normal, basic, average dowry, which is perfectly acceptable. However, in Canada, the lifestyle here in Canada is different. Everything is more expensive, etc., etc. So he can't be offering $2,000 because back home that's what they do. It has to be something which is status quo at the time where they're living. And now in another hadith, ويؤيد ما جاءه. So another riwayah, another narration from Al-Imam Muhammad al-Bakar عليه السلام, أن علي ibn أبي طالب عليه السلام أصدق فاطمة رضي الله عنها وعليها السلام درعا من حديد. So he says that he gave, like we said, he sold his shield, which essentially was the source of his the for his which was the source of his money, the money for his dowry for Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam. And then he added a couple other things as well. For example, there was what we call a so what they used to grind things. So they used it to grind wheat. They used it to grind, or kind of like dry their clothes or wash their clothes, etc., etc. Which overall ended up coming up to about, in this hadith, about 500 dirhams. Okay, whereas before we were hearing about 480, so a difference of about 20 dirhams. And as we said, each dirham is worth about 3 grams of silver. Okay, so like we said, the approximate dowry for Sitna Fatima alayhi salam was exactly the same amount as her mother's, and all the wives of the Prophet alayhi salam, all the sisters of Sitna Fatima alayhi salam, and essentially came up to approximately the value of, let's say, $1,500 Canadian. Okay. However, like we said, that is back then, and that quote unquote $1,500 Canadian, if you would, got them a lot more than what it gets someone today. So, like we said, it has to be status quo, whatever's normal and the norm at your time in your area. That is what the meher should be. It should not be extravagant beyond that, nor miserly lower than the status quo. Because there is a narration from Ibn Hisham rahmatullah alayh. However, the narration does not have a sanad. The sanad is maqtu'. That means it's cut off. There's no sanad where it says that the meher of Sitna Fatima alayhi salam was 4 dirhams as opposed to 480. Allahu a'lam if it was a case of part of the word being missed. Instead of it being 480, it was just the 4, and the 180 was accidentally removed. If it was, Allahu A'lam, the reason. However, there's a random narration which has no sanad, which says that her dowry was 4 dirhams as opposed to 480 dirhams, which is a massive difference. Now, on the other side, on the flip side, you have some people who again, I don't know if it's accidental or intentional, Allahu A'lam. However, they flip dirhams for dinars. The dirham is silver, dinar is gold. So you got a massive difference here. So you either got 480 dirhams or 480 dinars of gold, which is a meher or a dowry, which is essentially impossible and out of this world. In any case, all right. وعن علباء بن أحمر اليشكري أن عليا تزوج فاطمة عليهما السلام فباع بعيرا له ب84 400 درهم فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اجعلوا, listen to this, اجعلوا ثلثين في الطيب وثلثا في الثياب. So now, according to this hadith, so they had the meher, which we discussed. Okay, let's say, like we said, 480 dirhams approximately, or even 500 dirhams if you would. So now the Prophet ﷺ told them that use 2/3 of the money and buy what? Tib, perfumes, utur. Use 2/3 of the meher and buy utur, perfumes. And then the last third, use it for clothes. So imagine at the time, let's say again, about $1,500 Canadian approximately. At the time, don't compare that to $1,500 today. He said use 2/3 of it in buying perfumes. And why I'm emphasizing this is because, a lot of the times, our wives or sisters, they want to spend whether it's their own money or meher or whatever it is, on clothes, on perfumes, on whatever it is. A lot of the times, sometimes the men will try to kind of direct them in another way, which according to us is more useful and is not as wasteful, etc. However, here you have the Prophet ﷺ himself straight up telling them, spend 2/3 of the money in perfumes, and then the last third in clothes. Khair, inshallah. All right. جهازها من دار أبيها. Now, and again, why we're covering all these little steps. Oh, wow. Time is flying. Subhanallah. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try to hurry this up, inshallah. Why we're covering all these steps is because, alhamdulillah, for those of us who do have children or daughters or even sons who are going to, inshallah, be getting married, etc., we need to understand how the Prophet ﷺ did this. Because unfortunately, the image that we are given, with regards to these things is very different, to say the least. In any case, I'm going to try to finish up at least this part, inshallah. So now, عن علي عليه السلام وكرم الله وجهه قال جهز رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فاطمة في خيل. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna try to avoid too much of the Arabic and just translate it quickly. So here, according to Ali alayhi salam radiallahu an, he says that the Prophet alayhi salatu salam himself also gifted Sitna Fatima alayhi salam and prepared her for her marriage with Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam. And some people still have this in their cultures where the father of the bride do provide something. Some cultures, the father of the bride doesn't provide anything, or the family of the bride, I should say, don't provide anything, and it's all on the groom. However, in this case, the Prophet ﷺ gave her, essentially, just again, to be concise, beautiful pieces of clothes, of silk clothes, clothes in cotton, etc., etc. He also gave them essentially things to furnish the house. So things like what do you call it, like a pitcher, if you would. I don't know if it's called a pitcher, obviously, in the context, obviously the way that they used it, but in Arabic we call it like a brit, but essentially kind of like a pitcher that they would use to pour obviously water and other things. He gave them sorts of kind of like mats or mattresses, if you would, to sit on, etc. And there was also the sort of cushions, of which they were made of special plants and materials that every time that you push on them or you sit on them, a beautiful scent comes out, etc., etc. So he was essentially giving them, furniture, or furnishing, their home for them as a gift. Again, I'm just trying to quickly finish off this part, inshallah. And then we had Ummahat al-Mu'mineen alayhinna salam, Sitna Aisha and Salama alayhinna salam radiallahu anhunna, preparing Sitna Fatima and their home for the wedding of Sitna Fatima alayha salam. If you guys don't mind, just give me another couple minutes, inshallah. We're going to go over the half hour just by a few minutes, inshallah. I just want to finish off this little part here. So عن مسروق عن عائشة وأم سلمة. So both Sayyidina Aisha and Salama, the wives of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, narrated this exact same hadith where they say that the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام told us to prepare Sitna Fatima for Sayyidina Ali, for their marriage and their wedding. So basically they went, they prepared the home. So they cleaned up. So essentially, subhanallah, look at these beautiful little details that they did. So they went and they found the most fine sand that was available. Okay, and they covered obviously, because the floors were obviously, they were dirt, right? It was natural, ground and dirt floors in the homes, obviously. However, they went and they found the finest sand, the softest sand they could find, and they poured it all over the floor and in the corners of the home, so that when the newlyweds come to their home, nobody gets hurt by stepping on any rocks or anything like that. Subhanallah, like these small, quote unquote, small little details that they did for the newlyweds, absolutely beautiful. Subhanallah. Obviously try to equate to these things and put them into context to nowadays, whether it's a nice beautiful carpet or whatever you want it to compare it to. However, subhanallah, try to put it into context as it is these days. And then they said they also stuffed the pillows to make them nice and fluffy, so that they're comfortable for them, that when they go to sleep. And then Sitna Aisha and Sitna Salama alayhi salam, they said we gave them raisins and dates to eat, so essentially some sweets, right? And we gave them the coldest and the most tasteful water that we can give them. So essentially, the highest class of everything that they could find. Okay, not being miserly, not being cheap, the best of everything. Okay, so whether it's food, whether it's drink, whether it's the preparation of the floor of the home, everything. And then they also put kind of, what do you call them? Hangers, if you would, or like like the clothing rods, the standing ones, that you throw all your clothes on and then your drawers are empty because all your clothes are on those hangers. So they put two of them. They said we put one for their clothes and then another one for the pitcher, the pitcher that they use to pour water, etc. And then they said, subhanallah, alayhinna salam, Sitna Aisha and Sitna Salama alayhinna salam, they said, we had never seen and prepared a wedding like we did for Fatima alayhi salam. And I'm just going to finish off with this last hadith, inshallah, and we will be done. So عن ابن بريدة عن أبيه رضي الله عنهما قال لما خطب علي فاطمة عليهما السلام قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إنه لا بد للعرس من وليمة. So Sayyidina Ibn Burayda narrated from his father radiallahu anhuma that when Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam and Sayyidina Fatima alayhi salam got married, the Prophet alayhi salam said that there must be a walima, some sort of feast. قال فقال سعد. So now Sa'd radiallahu anhu says علي كبش. He says, I'm going to take care of essentially the meats. وقال فلان علي كذا وكذا من dhura. And someone said, I'll take care of the corn. And someone else said, I'll take care of such and such. It just goes to show that especially at the beginning of their lives together, it wasn't expected that the newlyweds And Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, obviously just paid a dowry, and they just are starting their lives together, etc. It wasn't expected of them to kind of host everybody else, kind of like is done nowadays. However, the community, and this is what a community is. The community came together and said, you know what? I can take care of this. Oh, I can take care of this. I can take care of this. Everybody stepped up with their own personal abilities, right? Within their means to prepare the food and the celebration for everybody around them. And it wasn't expected of the newlyweds to do that. This is an ummah. This is a community. So the stress, and everybody knows, anybody who's been married knows the stress of preparing a wedding for people. So here, it wasn't on the newlyweds. They were at peace. They didn't need to worry about stressing about, inviting people or preparing the home or preparing anything. That was all done from everybody else, essentially. Right here, you had Sitna Aisha radiallahu anha and Sitna Salama radiallahu anha preparing the home, preparing Sitna Fatima alayha salam. And then you had everybody else from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum preparing, the food, etc., etc. This is a community. This is a family. This is a family. This is the definition of community and family. This is our deen. This is our deen. Unfortunately, not what has become custom nowadays. In any case, inshallah, next dars will continue on the subject of their wedding, inshallah, in more detail, because there are a few other pretty lengthy hadith, which will inshallah continue on next time. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallam. Jazakumullahu khair.